most CEOs are crazy. Like they're freaking nuts, and they don't want to admit it. You are crazy. It's why you're actually a pioneer. You are comfortable in chaos, and it is a superpower. It is 100% also your Achilles heel. Whatever your number one strength is, it will become your Achilles heel to scale. If it's marketing, sales, product, it doesn't matter, systems even. So then what we have to do is reflect on a previous day and just ask ourselves, how did I show up? Did I go to the gym? No, I feel guilty about that. Regret. I think regret is just a great tool. It's like the ultimately simplified, people overcomplicate it.
Dan, absolute pleasure having you on here. I ask everybody the same first question, and that is, what system in your personal life, we'll say here, has made all other things easier for you?
I would say my weekly meeting with my wife.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that one, what I learned a long time ago is all my friends that have gotten divorced, there was a moment, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years prior, where the relationship started to fracture. And what happened is, and I saw it happen, you know, like a lot of times you see from the outside, you can see it, and you just seen it kind of widen and widen and widen. And what I wanted to solve is, because like I'm committed to my marriage. I don't ever there want to be a moment where the gap is so wide that I can't repair it. And I think that's what happened. A lot of times I think people, had they caught it early, could have kept the relationship together, but because it grew so wide, it was just too big of a journey to kind of come back to. So every week I ask my wife a question. I say, how have I shown up for you as a husband? And my only job is to shut up and say, thank you. And I will tell you, that feedback system, that release valve, I'm sure for my wife, that opportunity to kind of calibrate on a weekly basis. And that's one of several questions we go through in our meeting. Has been definitely one of the most impactful things to our marriage.
Do you quantitatively measure it so you can track it over the next meetings, or what does that look like?
We used to, but then as soon as you quantify something like that that's more qualitative, you can game it.
Sure.
I'll tell you examples of how I game it. Having her
Flowers
score
right
me
before.
first. So there's ways to game that. There's what you do, like you said, bring flowers to the meeting the night before. Be like, wow, you look so great. Thanks for taking care of the kids. You're such an incredible mom. I'm so lucky to have you. And she's like, what? And then it's like, oh, it's Friday. Now I get it. And trust me, she would game it on her in her own ways as well. So we used to quantify it around different dimensions, provider, partner, all that stuff. And then, you know, at the end of the day, and what was funny is like when we started doing this like almost a decade ago, I would say like 60% of the time there was a fight.
Yeah.
I didn't know the only answer was thank you.
Oh, so you would disagree with her?
Oh, and she would disagree with me, and she'd be like, it's funny because like she'd ask me the question, and I'd give her like a really clear answer. I think you were a 7.8 or whatever, and then I'd ask her the question, and it's so funny because my wife, she'll sit there and she'll scan, and she'll be like, okay, so last Friday, okay, Saturday, Sunday. Oh yeah, no, I didn't like that, and I'm like, whoa, like, what are you doing? She's literally scanning her whole experience of like every time I did anything and then using that and tallying it up. I was like, okay, let's just talk about how you feel. Like, just what is it? And the reality of it is like, look, every man knows it's the same stuff. For me, I can just speak about my experience. Don't pick up after myself. Don't acknowledge her for all the work she does to keep her family together. You know, probably for her love language is, you know, like dedicated time, quality time. So it's just like, hearing that and then adjusting, that's been the biggest gift. And now, like I would say 98% of the time we have really productive meetings.
Sure.
We don't fight. But it's been a game changer.
Yeah, we do something really similar, and I literally just filmed this like hour and 10-minute YouTube video where I broke down. We have an agenda on Asana. We do a segue, then we review. So we have rocks for the quarter, like goals, and we decide what we want to do. And then we go through and look at our calendar, and then we do what essentially, I know you're familiar with EOS, but we do an IDS session. So identify, discuss, and solve issues. And that's where it can get like, you know, in radical transparency, which is one of our values. Like the last one we've been dating for 3.5 years now. We just did our annual planning, was around marriage, you know, and, you know, she wants it sooner than I do. And so then it's like you had said, it's funny because, you know, argument's a strong word, but it is heated, right? Because like you're having two people come in and talk about that thing. And sometimes it can get like, especially if you disagree, but I think it's so healthy, that you can kind of plot this path forward. So I just ripped through a little bit of our agenda. You broke down one thing that you did, but obviously I'm a systems nerd and I love that you are as well. Give me like 2 or 3 other things that you guys talk about or questions that you're willing to share. Cause I know a lot of people love
it's all on the internet.
That.
Yeah. I think I do. Sam, what was the name of the video? My videographer's here. The family one. Like the CEO family.
How a CEO manages their family.
Yeah. So we broke down everything from our relationship mission to everything.
So you have a mission for the relationship.
Heck yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have my own mission for the relationship I want. She has her own design for us. But in the meeting, because I was traveling, it might not have happened, but I think, we moved it here. I mean, some of the unique stuff we do, one of the big things, because I manage the finances, I educate my wife every week on the investments, our family office. Like, I really want to ensure that if anything ever happened to me, she felt informed. Even though I have a great team, if something happens, they already know what they're supposed to do with the capital. Like, even though she wouldn't have to worry about it, that's a part of the agenda. But like we talk, the 3 wins for the week is the first thing.
Okay.
Have to start with that.
So wins, you said personal wins or wins that together?
Anything we consider wins. Okay. No, it's an opportunity for both of us to get on the same page.
Got it.
Like, what have you been up to this week? Because we're both entrepreneurs. We're both moving fast. I mean, when I'm traveling, I always look at her Instagram stories and be like, okay, that looks fun. That's okay. Now I know. Then I call her. Like, I don't call until
you get updated.
I got to scan the content first, and then I'm like, okay, now I know what she's been up to. Then I call, ask her about her day. So wins is always a great one. Then we kind of check in and rate our roles, support questions. This is really good ones. What's important to you this week, and then how can I support you?
Oh, that is a good one.
Those are
that is a good one.
Yeah, because I mean, other than that, sometimes people just don't feel supported, or they forget to ask. Then we always plan the next 2 weeks. So we look at our calendars. Typically at the beginning of the month, we might scan for 6 weeks, but then typically throughout the month, we'll just look every 2 weeks. So kind of like a longer term, short term. Then we have our scorecards, just like an EOS type meeting. Yep. So we have our family, Martell financials, which is I manage the P&L and all that stuff. We've got both of our businesses. We score our core values.
Okay.
So we have core values as a family, and we ask ourselves 1 out of 10 how we're doing. And usually the lowest scored value gets an action item.
Okay.
So whatever thing that we're doing not as good, we make a commitment for the next 7 days to go do something.
Can you give me an example of one of those that you've done in the past? Because I think that's really interesting.
Well, there's so many. Yeah. I mean, let's say one of them was we support our community, and we haven't done anything community focused. We might make a commitment to go to church and serve people lunch or something like that. But usually it's with the family. The core values are very family oriented. Then we got our missions and goals. So we do the same thing. We do annual planning, quarterly planning. We review our goals and kind of commitments to each other. Probably the most important is plan the week. It's literally bolded in the agenda. Plan the weekend. When you have with kids, like soccer, basketballs, skiing. What are we doing? Like, what do? You got a commitment. You're going to work out with your friend. You got CrossFit at 10 a.m. I've got to go run 3 hours for triathlon train. Like, there's always the weekend is probably the thing that takes the most coordination. Then we got our Asana projects, and we also have our discussions, which I guess would be similar to IDS. And then we have previous projects we just review and update on.
And how has this all changed? You touched on it for a second, but since you had kids, right? And you have 2 kids?
10 and 11.
Awesome. And since you guys have had kids, how does that play? Do they ever do anything like this? Or like,
I would say our children were the forcing function for us to start doing this.
Wow.
Prior to that, I had an assistant. My wife had her business. She had a great business partner. It was just, there wasn't a lot of conflicts. I think that's like, for me, I look at any friction as a feedback loop. Elon Musk said this once. He goes like, the AI algorithm for self-driving is anytime somebody has to touch the steering wheel, right? It's not when there's a crash.
Oh, I see.
His consideration for an error rate is the driver had to intercept the driving.
Makes sense.
Either they didn't feel comfortable or they just wanted to drive or whatever it is. You didn't create an environment that felt safe enough for them to want to drive. They had to touch the steering wheel. And using that consideration, to me, anytime there's been conflict around travel schedules or I wasn't aware, whatever it is, that was a feedback loop for me to say what system, what communication process, what conversation would need to happen. Again, we're systems nerds. So that's the way I think. And I would say the kids really introduced, our boys are 11 months apart. So we had Irish twins, they're called.
Oh, I have Irish.
Okay, there you go.
Twin,
So you get it. So it was like, like your parents essentially were like having twins but pregnant twice.
Exactly.
It was a blur. I'm doing a venture-backed company. My wife's starting a new agency. Like it was just smashing, everything. And eventually I was like, okay, we need a little bit of systems. And that's all I did. It's just I took the fundamentals that made me a great business leader and just asked myself which ones could I translate in a different tonality maybe.
Yeah.
But honestly, you could go 100%. It's just some of it. It's like my wife often says to me, she's like, don't talk to me that way.
Yeah.
Like I'm not your employee. And she's not wrong. It's
Yeah.
just sometimes when I'm like following an agenda and a rhythm, it's like question, answer, next.
Yeah.
She's like, you didn't ask me how I felt about that. I'm like, I'm an idiot. I'm so sorry. What do you think? So I think that was the moment where a lot of this got introduced to our lives.
Wow.
Right? The need for disconnecting and going on our couples retreats every quarter, right?
Oh, you guys do that?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
I mean, I would say second to my weekly meeting.
Okay.
That is, personally, it's my favorite. We
Yeah.
just did our one probably 3 weeks ago for kind of this year. We usually go for 2 nights, 3 days. And the end of the year one is always the biggest one. We've got to walk away with our preloaded year, which is like integrating all of our commitments and our travels and our vacations. But it's really an opportunity to disconnect, to reconnect, man. Sometimes we'll do like facilitated retreats where we'll go somewhere with somebody and do like couple type, not therapy, but like sessions, sound bath, meditation, spa kind of stuff. So it makes it, super fun. But we always go there with kind of a process to review the previous, 90 days, 3 months, talk about what's working, what's not working. And it's just the ability to date again.
Yeah.
Like, that's like one of my favorite concepts that I've heard a long time ago is never stop dating your wife. Like I want to never stop dating my wife. I look at her and I'm like, gosh darn it, I'm lucky. And like, this is awesome. And like, I'm always trying to surprise her and like, what's the next thing I could do for her? And I plan those retreats. Those are like, that's my jam. Thinking about it. Like last time I surprised her with like, private plane. We went to a cool place. Like I want to make sure that she feels like she's being dated. And that to me is kind of the core idea behind the couple of retreats is to disconnect, to reconnect.
Wow. I love that. I'll tell you what, if you guys were quantitatively measuring it, if you just gave her this podcast, you might get an extra few points on the next meeting. I'll tell you that. This is
whatever I got to do, man.
Yeah, we might have to share this with her.
Yeah. Clip,
so
send.
Man, this is awesome. It's funny. When obviously your team first reached out to get connect with me, I have read your book, Buyback Your Time,
awesome.
and amazing book. And
you.
like I'm a systems guy, and I've read your book.
Dude, you told me when I came in here, just so everybody knows, I asked you 1 out of 10, how much do you love systems? You're like, a lot. And I said, your mom being a 10, where are you at? And you said 10.
A 10, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I expected like a strong 8.
No, I'd say a 10. It's like it's so funny. Sometimes it's like I feel like I knew it was going to happen, but I feel somewhat like I'm interviewing myself, because it's when you said earlier that you're just like, you're taking what was successful in the business and you're putting in your personal life. That's like my jam a little bit on the personal side of things. Just like, okay, what works in the business? Weekly meetings, agendas for the meetings, quarterly meetings, like
goals.
Masterminds, goals, exactly.
Yeah.
All of that stuff's works so well. And we'll talk about house managers and some of the other things you do in the book in a little bit. You just met my house manager.
Yeah, that was super cool.
Which was
awesome. You mentioned you hired her as a byproduct of
after I read the
last.
So I read the book, and then I took a bunch of notes. I was like, oh, this is good. I love the systems thinking, et cetera, et cetera. And then it was like the last chapter that had like something it was like
lifestyle.
So casual, like buyback lifestyle. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And it was like, I know this may seem extreme, but get a house manager. And I was like, well, I like extreme, and I'm a systems guy.
I was like, they're gonna judge me so hard when I talked about like the gum in my toothpaste.
I think you said like she like brings you a protein shake while you're
exactly.
in the
I just put my hand out and it's there. Like I knew people were like, okay, this guy's intense.
I knew that people would probably give you flack, but for me, it was like a light bulb went off. And it's I have a video where I walk through the stuff that mine does, and I even got some flack for it too, because for example, she'll like replace my toothpaste, like my shampoo. She packs my gym bag for me the next day. And it's been when people ask me, in the last year, my personal life, what was like one of the best things I did, I would say it was my house manager. I had 10
That's
out of 10,
awesome.
and that was from you. So
Thank you.
yeah, I appreciate you doing that. And I actually, we're already on the subject, so let's go a little bit deeper. I could go on all the things that mine does for me, but just in case people haven't gotten the book yet or whatever, walk us through a little bit of what a house manager is for you, and some of the things that she does to maybe make, enable you both in your personal and business life to live what you would consider your maximum life.
Yeah. The way I think about life in general is to the degree that I can build leaders that own outcomes allows me to free up my time. And that's the whole concept of the buyback principles. We don't hire people to grow our businesses. We hire people to buy back our time, because if they do that, we get the first, right? But if you hire people just to grow your business capacity, you don't get the second, right? A lot of people get to about 12, 14 employees, a couple million in revenue, and they hate their lives because they spend the whole day spinning plates and managing people, making sure they're busy, but they never have time for themselves. I actually use the opposite, which is I always start with my calendar. So when you think of like, for most people, if they've already got their business kind of going, the big opportunity is in their home. It's not in their like it can be in their business, but the low hanging fruit, the low cost stuff is actually the grocery shopping, the vehicle maintenance, the changing the tires, the switching of your gear from seasons to everything. So the way I look at it is I have my executive assistant who is my partner in life, and in many ways, some people call them chiefs of staff or, but executive assistant for me, it's not a virtual person. You met Ann, she's here. She travels with me. And then my house manager, Betty, reports to Ann. And the way I think about it is she is the CEO of Martell Family Inc. So there's a company called Martell Family Inc. and there's people that are part of it, and there's a P&L, and she owns 100%. All my real estate, all my vehicles, my plane, everything she manages. She manages the maintenance schedule, the storage, the boats, like literally everything. I want to buy real estate. Betty, I want to go buy a place in the mountains. She buys it. I want a new car. Betty, I want to buy a McLaren. She went by. I went to Croatia, came back, and the car was in the garage with a bow tie.
Wow.
She managed the whole thing. Like zero Dan involved. Every time the sales guy would message me, hey, do you want paint protection on that? I said, dude, if you text me one more time and not talk to Betty, she'll kick your butt. Like she will literally attack you because for her, that's her. She understands, because I've coached her over the years to just like, you own this. So like, you don't come to me about like insurance changes and updates. Like I trust you. Here's the budget. Here's the home. You got the P&L. She managed the petty cash. She managed all the other team. Like we have team members for like lawn care, like everything. And I know a lot of people. I live in a pretty affluent neighborhood, and my neighbors still do a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, they're mowing their lawn.
And I'm like, but why do you do it in the business? You've done all this stuff that you don't do in your business. You understand the concept. And then you're telling me you don't have time to go for a workout because you're busy with putting furniture together? Like, this is what we're doing? It fascinates me that we don't look at time the same if it's certain things. Now, I will tell you where I get in trouble. My wife's love language is acts of service.
You're delegating it out.
As a guy that does nothing other than spend time with people I love and create from a place of like things I enjoy doing that creates a lot of value, that's really tough. So I personally have had to show up in a different way because that's what my wife needs to see, that I know isn't conducive to this, but that's okay. So it's little things like at the end of the night, go and I clean up the kitchen, pick up after myself, which it sounds trivial for a lot of men, but it actually was hard for me because I would rather just keep moving fast through the world and not have to clean up, right? I'm an ideation person. I come into a meeting, I listen, I give my 2 cents, I move on, I trust the team. So there were certain things in the home that I had to kind of take a step back and tweak to make it work. But having somebody own and be accountable for everything. When I'm talking about passports expiration, credit cards in our family, like when I say everything, it's everything.
Give me like what are 2 extremes that if somebody heard this?
I think the one when people heard that when I wanted to get the new McLaren, I just asked Betty to get it and she went and bought it like 100%, like worked with my assistant to wire the money, to deal with everything, and it just showed up while we were gone. And then I just came back and it was there.
Yeah.
A lot of people thought that was pretty crazy. We just bought a home in the mountains. I literally told her, go buy a home, work with my wife to the degree she wants to be involved. But the first time I ever stepped into it was after we had closed on it, after we did a bunch of cool renos, and then I went and I stayed in it. I never saw it ever. If it doesn't require me, I don't get involved.
Sure.
I would say, she manages our travel stuff. So like if we were mentioned San Diego, we used to go to Encinitas, she would get ahead. Sometimes she'd fly down ahead of time and set up. If we rented a big house for a few months, she would set everything up so that when we walked into it, it was the exact same. We have an SOP for our home. It would just be set up, ready to go. We had a process, clear the garage, set up the offices because I talk loud. So it's like in a home, it's actually better to be in a garage, especially in San Diego. Like it's so warm and nice out there.
Sure.
I'm Canadian, so I'm like, no problem. Put me in the garage. So we just park in these massive driveways and I'm in the garage and it's soundproof and like just little things like that. But knowing that you don't have to think about it and it's just taken care of. And if there's conflict, she can go to my executive assistant, and then only things that ever need to get my attention get brought up. So like when I say, hey, we're going to Cabo in March for March break, done. Like I don't need to sit there and look at 17 listings on Airbnb. The preference file's already created. The budgets are yours. Go figure it out.
So let's talk, I'm just going to keep on nerding out here. Let's talk about the hierarchy of your family, right?
Yeah.
So is the EA/chief of staff at the top? What does that look like going down?
Yeah, the way I do it is I have companies that I own that are run by teams.
Okay.
And essentially each one of those people like are the CEOs and they run those companies. To the degree they need me, it's a pull, not push. I don't require any meetings. I require certain reports, and I'm available as the talent to support them. All those requests on my time go through my executive assistant.
Okay.
And then based on what she knows are my priorities in regards to like these, I tell her like this year, this is my priority, this company right here. Then anything else, I need to do this, this, and this. Other than that, if I have open space, you manage what the priority is. And then in my personal life, I work through everything typically through my executive assistant. And so if I need to get a deal done, I'm investing in a company, I do the meeting. And then this is the coolest part. We have a daily meeting every day. And she asked me past meetings. She'll go, hey, you met with, Carlos. What do you think? I go, I'm in. Okay, cool. What's the investment? I tell her. She goes, cool. She talks to the lawyers, gets the contracts, sets up the wire transfers, sets it up. Then on the call, I go in and I approve it. Like it's streamlined,
Very cool.
The whole thing. So my family stuff reports through and my executive assistant. And every week, her, my wife, and Betty all have a meeting separate to coordinate the home. But I'm informed afterwards on the decisions.
Okay.
So oftentimes I'll be like, we have a bunch of stuff that's probably on my assistant's list to talk to my wife about, but she'll review it in next week's meeting. So everything from like, there's a conflict, there's an opportunity that Dan's speaking at this event, and then we can take the plane, go down to this place, and your friend lives here. So I just tell her, can you talk to Renee about it? Now those are the edges where my wife's kind of like, I miss talking to you about it.
Yeah, I can see that.
So I'm cognitive of that and like I'll figure it out. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm open to the feedback. So sometimes like if it feels too transactional, too cold,
Yeah.
I totally get that and I don't want that. But at the same time, I'm trying to be efficient for all parties involved. Our lives move so quick and we have so many things going on that it's only fair to the people that are responsible to do things like book travel and get homes and stay ahead of stuff because we have service level agreements in between. I mean, we have a lot of nerdy stuff like that.
Yeah, and like let's go one layer deeper on the nerdy stuff a little bit. So you talked about like you have your preferences documented. So let's say your assistant is going to either buy the McLaren or she's booking something for you to go to Cabo or whatever. How do you know what seat you like to sit in, what time you like to fly? Yeah, so where do you document it? What does that look like? Walk me through that process.
I don't know because I don't own that document.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have a program guide. Every department in my life, I just call it a guide, right? And it's essentially sometimes it's a document and it links to other things. Some companies I don't like. I was talking about this on the way over here because I used to be a fan. Like I would say I was like not a 10 out of 10. I was probably an 8.7 out of 10 on the system side and checklist and all that. And then where I've gotten to recently is kind of the concepts of hearts, not hands. Okay. I think that if you're selling a commodity like a burger, having a checklist to make it foolproof that you can take unskilled labor and have them produce a work product like a burger, you need a documented SOP franchise manual like a McDonald's or a Burger King. And then there's this kind of different stages of business evolution, startups, creative endeavors where the systems have to be less about a checklist and more about principles. And then there's an even like higher level of process or creative output that can't even have really the North Star principles and stuff because you're still trying to innovate and any constraint around the innovation could stop you from figuring out kind of the next level of thing. In math, they call it the local maxima problem where, if you're trying to create an algorithm to find the highest point, well, if you're on this mound, but to get to this higher point, you have to go through the valley, it'll never be able to discover because it doesn't go explore.
Oh, okay.
See what I'm saying?
Interesting.
Yeah. So you got to be careful how much systems you create because when you create a system, you're essentially locking in a process. And if you want to innovate, then nobody's allowed to challenge the process. So I would say for some of a lot of the tools and the systems I allow the leaders to own because I care more about their hearts, not their hands. I care more about the people development and them showing up and creating than I care about a system that they follow every time. So that is the balance that when you're trying to scale companies with owners and leaders, the systems are required, but you got to be careful where you put systems like finance for sure.
Yeah.
Right. But FP&A, financial planning analysis, maybe not, because it's a creative endeavor. And if it's a checklist and they follow the checklist, they'll never be allowed to go and say like, what about this? And look, you can introduce meetings where you kind of do SWOT analysis. There's ways to overcome that. But I think about this often, right?
Yeah.
Do I care more that I have the right people that have an understanding of the vision, that are showing up dedicated to a mission, versus somebody that's capable of following a checklist? Like, which one's going to produce the biggest outcome?
And it makes a lot of sense. And it kind of goes back to, I think, Dan Sullivan, Who Not How, as well. Like,
Totally.
Yeah, the idea behind that. Obviously, we're nerding out around systems here. We're talking about the personal life. Where did this kind of originate, this love for systems? Almost always it's going to be from some kind of pain point that originally happened. So like, where was it that you started like first implementing it? And then what were some of those first systems that you put in place that you were like, oh my God, whether it was buying back your time personally or in your business?
You know, I really appreciate the question, because I've had to think about this quite a bit. You know, the book came out and just became a Wall Street Journal bestseller and continues to sell more copies every week. It literally blew my mind how much the entrepreneurial community just kind of pulled it into the language, the concepts. And, there's been evolutions for me. E-Myth, definitely 23 years old, 2 failed companies. That book changed my life. I hired an E-Myth coach, but it was even before that. I grew up in a really challenging environment, ended up in trouble with the law, got addicted to drugs as a teenager, and ended up in juvenile detention twice by the time I was 17. So what happened though is that when I got out of the second time I went to juvenile detention, I got released into a rehab center. I was there for 11 months, and that place saved my life. It's called Portage, and I did the deep work. I did the work on my feelings and my self-worth, and I rebuilt the trust that I'd lost with my family, my brothers, my sisters. And it was at the end of that program, I was actually helping the maintenance guy Rick clean out one of the cabins, and in one of the rooms in the cabins, because it was built in an old church camp, there was a yellow book on Java programming and a 486 computer. Like this old computer. And I never grew up with computers. We didn't have that kind of stuff in our home. And I just followed chapter 1 of this book, and 20 minutes later, I got the computer to spit out "Hello World." It was weird because I was like, hey, maybe I'm a computer genius. Like, I was like super dumb. Like, of course you're not. But it didn't matter. Like that moment exposed me to this thing that I quite enjoy. And I'll tell you how that pertains to systems. That was the first time in my life where I felt like I had all this chaos going on, that there was predictability.
Wow. That
it was calming, that if I wrote the code, it would always, as long as the computer was running, literally as long as there was electricity to the computer, it would produce that outcome every time. And growing up with so much uncertainty and chaos, that's what was my true addiction. The addiction was plugging in, getting into flow state, getting in the zone, writing code, and watching it create and produce. And as long as you built it right, it would do that forever. And I just thought, what a cool, you know what I mean? Like, I can do this for a profession. I remember I had 2 passions: plants and computers.
And you're like,
guess why? Yeah. My dad goes, yeah, you can always have a garden as a hobby. I think this computer thing, this is 97. So, and that's how I ended up becoming the tech entrepreneur that I am today, and all the investments I made. It was early days of writing code and then documenting code. And then eventually, how do I apply that to business? So what's interesting is the evolution for me is I started off by writing software, documenting software. And then when I started business, I used the principles from object-oriented programming. So that's super nerd. I can get into that. And then applied that to organizational design, and then had success there, but was horrible in relationships. And then applied the concepts of business growth to my relationship. And then now I've thrived with my marriage. Like it's literally was this evolution of just going from so much chaos and pain to finding a thing that I could get obsessed about. And honestly, it became my addiction for a long time, right? I'd code till 2, 3 in the morning. My dad would be like, you got to go to sleep. But he was just so happy I wasn't doing anything illegal. Yeah. Like, he's like, you got to sleep, but I'm okay with this.
Yeah. Wow. That's a pretty incredible journey to get to where you are right now as well. And I want to shift gears. We've talked a lot about the personal side, which you and I both love, but let's talk a little bit about some of the business systems that you guys are doing. Obviously, you've made multiple exits. You've worked with thousands of entrepreneurs, and you have this beautiful blend of both personal and business life. And we've talked about how you've balanced it on the personal side, but would you say like a few things on the business side and any one of your businesses that you've set up that's like really allowed you to stay in your zone of genius and be able to live life the way that you want to?
Yeah, I think like every business has these key kind of like operating tools that are required for you to actually grow. And the challenge is most people that struggle in growing their business is they don't know that these things are missing, and they only have one gear: work harder.
Yeah.
Right. And many people get addicted to the distraction of the work.
Yeah.
And they don't know because nobody's there to audit it, to tell them, hey, why'd you spend eight hours doing this thing when you shouldn't have done that? But what I've always discovered is they inherently know it. Like if they woke up today and were honest with themselves and got quiet and said, what is something I did yesterday in my business I know I shouldn't have done? That's usually a good guide. You know, regret is a great guide to improvement. But the things that I always like when I start new companies is, first off, I need the organizational chart or an EOS, they call it the accountability chart or whatever. Because to me, that's the architecture. I need to understand how does, in manufacturing, raw material turn into a finished good, right? I'm a nerd when it comes to manufacturing, like theory of constraints and Kaizen and Six Sigma and all these things. That's kind of like my dad grew up he worked in Westinghouse and Siemens. So he worked in a plant. And when I got into software, he would tell me about the stuff they were doing, the quality assurance stuff. And I would read those books to educate me in software development.
Very cool.
Like Toyota Production System and quality systems, all that stuff. So once I understand from a people point of view, and in modern day business is information. How does an idea on the left side end up becoming a product, a marketing campaign, sales process, and move through the organization to invoicing, collecting capital from your customer, right? Like I would say that the finished good from the customer is not actually the service being delivered or the product being sold. It's the money that came in, and it's cash available to redeploy in the machine. So first off, I think every business needs that, because how are we supposed to talk about improving stuff if we don't understand how things flow? So too often when I sit down with, when I coach people, you need to bring that to the meeting. I need to understand who reports to who, what are you responsible for, who else is in your organization? It's 5 people or 50 people, right? We can abstract it a little bit, the bigger it is. And then from there, you tell me what your goals are. And I go, okay, well now we got to start finding the who's. So it's like, if you tell me you want to have your own venture firm and you want to not be the CEO of this business and you want a house manager, it's like, cool, we got to put that in the diagram. And then we can start sequencing, because I think that sequencing equals success. To the degree that I get the ordering right is actually how we succeed. It's like a recipe. I could have the same ingredients as another person, and I follow my no recipe, and I end up with a pile of mush. And the other person follows a completely different set of instruction, and they get a beautiful chocolate cake. Same ingredients. So it's like, it's not even just knowing that you need to hire these people. It's like, we're going to hire this person because they're going to get this result, which is going to unlock this capital that's going to allow us to then invest in this next hire that's going to unlock this resource. So, you know what I mean? Because to me, if you have a problem that can be solved with money, it's not a problem. So I'm always, every decision I make, specifically around people, is to unlock resources, typically through the form of profit. And with that, I can go solve other problems.
Give me 2 or 3. I have a few in my head right now, and I love that you're talking about the organizational chart. That was also one of the biggest changes I think that allowed us to really scale as well. It was like the organizational chart used to just be like this thing that was like there, and it was when someone asked for it, I was like, oh yeah, here it is. And then when I hired a senior director of operations, he was like, no. We start with your organizational chart.
It is the business.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
exactly.
like it's the operating system for me, the architecture of the operating system of the business. So in all of my leadership conversations, it's probably like, we probably bring it up like, 2 times out of 3, because it's the thing that helps everybody understand why we're making a decision around a department or a product line or whatever. The thing that I think people misunderstand when they're trying to sequence the people side or solve problems, they don't understand the difference between a dumpster fire and a house fire. Okay. Like most people see a fire and think this is a problem. Anybody that says grown companies realize certain problems will always be a problem, and it's not great, but we only have a certain amount of resources and focus and time. Let's focus on the right things. So oftentimes with my leaders, they're like, no, we got to do this. And I go, that's not going to be like, this is a problem. There's a kitchen fire. There's a grease fire in your kitchen. And if you don't put that out, the whole house is going to go down. Versus, hey, in customer support, you're a little behind. That's a dumpster fire. Okay. It's isolated. It's not going to burn down the house, but we got these other things. So even just understanding how to prioritize challenges, and I like to call them puzzles, then we are able to allocate resources accordingly. But it's always through the lens of what's the minimum amount of effort to get the biggest return. So examples of that, I mean, it's most companies, I'm always starting with the sales engine, right? The bottom of the funnel. If you got a funnel, you have several stages, maybe let's call it 3, awareness, consideration, purchase. If we don't make sure that the 10 people you talk to every week, we're not getting at least half of those people to enroll into your thing, that's the biggest form of leverage. Then we move up the funnel. See, most people want to talk about leads, the chocolate. Marketing. Yeah, it's marketing. It's lead generation. It's like, what do I need? I need more customers. You don't even know. It's like, let's talk about retention. Well, what do you mean? It's like, well, are the people you have that are buying, are they sticking around? Are they paying you whatever you sold them? Are they upset with you? Did you create the system to expand them? Right? What's the lifetime value on them? Because once we get the machine right, then we can go. But even then, I would still focus on conversion first, then middle funnel, then top of funnel.
Yeah. Man.
So like even understanding that concept helps teams. Again, I unlock resources to then go solve more problems.
Oh, we've talked about EOS a few times in here, and what you just said, it was like just determining if it's a dumpster fire or it's a house fire. I love that statement too. And honestly, before I learned about traction and EOS, and even just if you put that aside, even just having an operating system in a business, I'm a systems guy, but I just we would have a weekly meeting with our leadership team, and there was no agenda. It was like, all right. And then it was really whoever talked the loudest and complained the most.
It's called a hippo.
That was where the resources
highest
went.
Person's opinion.
So, and then the nice thing about the IDS, and for those of you that don't know, it's identify, discuss, and solve issues. And you do it in that order. That sequence, like you said, matters. And so you list out all the problems, then you're identifying which problem gets the priority, then you're discussing and solve. And sometimes even today, start going through the IDS list, and then we start IDSing as we're going through the IDS list. And I have to be like, whoa. No.
Sequence
yeah,
first.
Let's figure out what is like you said, the house fire, and then let's put all of our energy and effort towards that, which has been a game changer for us on the business side. You had said a little bit about at the beginning of that, like auditing your time, like as a business owner, and then like the next day, what should I have not done yesterday that I can use to kind of get back my time a little bit?
Yeah, I call it regret is the ultimate focuser.
And how do you physically so I write in my journal, I have a prompt that tells me in an online journal, what could I have eliminated, automated, or delegated yesterday to get back my time, or what could I have added more leverage, right? That's the prompt I have. So that's been amazing for me. How do you, or if you're talking to somebody, you're trying to help them get back their time a little bit, what is that process of first even identifying what they're wasting their time on in the first place? They need to change?
I mean, for most people that are not systems nerds, I keep it very simple. I know this for a fact. Most people are inconsistent, show up at 60%, not 100%, don't scare themselves, are addicted to distractions. I actually think everybody has the answer within. This is because I believe to the degree we can personally develop, I'm a personal development person. I just happen to do business, but I'm a byproduct of at 17 going to rehab center and spending 11 months trying to understand who I was. That transformation that I went through from a scared child with zero self-confidence to one that had at least an awareness of my value in the world and how I wanted to show up, that was a byproduct of fixing things, right? Like the vices, the addiction that I had, my emotional intelligence. So when I say that people should reflect on their previous day and ask themselves, what's a decision that I made that I regret? It's broadly speaking, it's not even where could I get more leverage or how could I have automated something? It's saying when you showed up in that meeting and you responded that way to somebody, was that appropriate? Because I think a lot of leaders, so I talked about in the book with transformational leadership, most CEOs are crazy. They're freaking nuts and they don't want to admit it. It's you are crazy. It's why you're actually a pioneer. You are comfortable in chaos and it is a superpower. It is 100% also your Achilles heel. Whatever your number one strength is, it will become your Achilles heel to scale. If it's marketing, sales, product, it doesn't matter, systems even. So then what we have to do is reflect on our previous day and just ask ourselves, how did I show up? Did I go to the gym? No, I feel guilty about that. Regret. I think regret is just a great tool. It's the ultimately simplified. People overcomplicate it. Very simple. How about we get our mind right, we get our body right, and then we get our time right. And regret will tell you where you made a decision the day before, from how you reacted to what you didn't do, what you should have done. Did you show up half-assed? Should you have given it more? And then the simple process is, how about I just don't do that for today, right? I came from addiction, so it's like, just for today. I'm making a commitment just for today. And that is, for me, the simplest way I can explain how to get better. And it's systems, yes, but it's also emotions. It's also character. It's habits. It's just being consistent with, you already know, like, I believe every human on earth is here to become the person they needed most in their darkest days. Like the person that they would have listened to. If that person would have showed up when I was a teenager, I might have avoided some of the pain. I'm happy I went through it because it's shaped me. But that person that I admired or that I would have listened to or that I respected never showed up. Took a while. But now I wake up every day, try to strive to become that person. I know when I don't do something the day before, right? Like I was flying down here. I was saying this to a friend of mine. Like Sam and I, we sat next to each other because I wanted him to work with me on some stuff and we never did. That was my feedback for the day. And like now I know when I have it in my calendar to work with Sam, I'm going to honor what the calendar says. So it's like even people that have a lot of systems, they don't honor the system. They don't follow the checklist. They like, I got this, check out this SOP. It's like, all right, let me talk to your team.
Are you using it?
I want to talk to your team. Does your team feel support? That's why I call it hearts and hands sometimes. Because like at a certain point, it's not about the checklist. It's how you're showing up to execute the checklist. And I think that in certain organizations, depending on the size you are, is actually the point of leverage that has the biggest impact.
Well, yeah, final two questions I have for you. You mentioned I would be remiss if someone as optimized as you, we didn't at least talk about like your calendar, right? How you use your calendar, who manages your calendar? Is it blocked every second? Do you just have general blocks for creativity? So walk me through that a little bit on your day-to-day basis. Like who manages it? How often are you looking at it and updating it? And then is it every second's blocked? Is it blocks of like time for like, I'm just going to be working on one thing right now? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say a few things about my calendar that is completely different than most people. My calendar is not owned by Dan. If I enter something into my calendar, then I'm doing it wrong. Everything goes through my assistant. Why? Because she's the CEO of my time. I've asked her to be accountable to my time in all ways, always. So what does it look like? I usually keep the first 2 hours of the day for me to create. I create connected to my creator, and I will work with my assistant on our daily meeting for if there's an open spot, but usually I'm like 5 days ahead on that stuff. Everything else is 2 weeks for sure, sometimes 3 weeks, and like the big stuff is, you know, we're the quarters kind of baked, right? So I don't manage any of it. It's like every morning, my videographer Sam's sitting there, he goes, "What are we doing today?" And literally like every day, I go, "I don't know, dude." He's like, "Who are we going to see next?" I don't know. I look at Ann. She goes, "You're going to see Ravi." I said, "Oh, awesome. I can't wait to talk to him about systems." You know what I mean? Like I like for the most part, if I'm with my team, I don't even look. And if I'm not, it's there. And all the context is in the calendar entry. There's a joke amongst my team that if they put like, "Go to this address," and in the description, it said, "Jump off the cliff," I would just jump off the cliff. Because over the years, I learned that to the degree that I can give that, ownership to other people, it doesn't take cycle times in my mind, right? I just know that my calendar's got the stuff that I've committed to that's going to have the best alignment with what I know in my skill sets today to move my life forward. But the big stuff's already there. Like the retreats are there, the vacations are there, all the big stuff is in there. Then I have my projects for the quarter, and then I use my time in the morning. I don't do any meetings externally in the morning at all. Like pretty much 11 a.m. might be the first time I do a meeting. I'm working on myself, I'm researching, I'm creating, I'm pushing projects forward. And then most of the time I use the Buyback loop, which is my process for auditing my calendar, probably 2 to 3 times a year. And for the most part, every year my calendar looks 80% different.
Really?
Yes, 100%. I think that if you want to grow, like I think Dr. Ben Hardy talked about this in 10X is easier than 2X. He said, if you want to 10X your life, then 80%, he has a name for it. Essentially, 80% of your calendar has to be different, because if you didn't, then you're not going to get the results of a 10X because you don't have the space and it's literally a test. It's like, is 80% of your calendar different this year than last year? Then you didn't operate differently enough to get a 10X. Because if you keep doing the same thing, you'll always get the same results.
Yeah.
So every time I feel like I've hit a capacity, right? I've developed the skills, I'm executing, I've built the system, I've hired the people. Now I want to go to the next level. I go to my assistant. I say, we got to do a time and energy audit. We scan the last 2 weeks. We go, okay, this is yellow. And this is what's crazy is that in my life, most of my stuff is green, things that give me energy. But every once in a while, like a board meeting is yellow now. It used to be green. I enjoyed it for the first 2 years. Now it's yellow. So now I got to go renegotiate me even attending that. Or like last week, I was doing my one-on-ones and I realized that we're always done early. So I said, hey, I want us to renegotiate with everybody. It's 45 minutes, not an hour anymore for my one-on-ones. And those are like micro tweaks to the calendar to buy back my time. And at a certain point, you hire somebody to take over a whole swath of things they used to do from like when you're small, maybe it's client account management. When you're bigger, maybe it's leadership management. Maybe it's hiring a CEO to run a company that you started that you really shouldn't be running anymore. Maybe it's, hiring an operations person to take over all aspects of operations, but it's using the calendar. But first off, I don't put things in it. If I need to add stuff, it's a voice message to my assistant. She has direct access into all my systems, my contact, my, everything. She can coordinate, get things, add stuff to the calendar. No agenda, no attenda. If there's no agenda in there, I don't attend. Sam knows this. He doesn't put it in there. I'm not coming. I refuse to go. No, I want to know that you prep for the meeting. Yeah. Like, what are we reviewing? Let's be prepared. And then, I'm a big fan of like, what is the outcome from this conversation, right? I think a lot of people have meetings. They don't even know why they're on it. We have a rule in our company. If you're in a meeting and you don't feel like it's valuable, you vote with your attendance if you come again. And nobody can force you to go to a meeting. If they don't make the meeting interesting and fun, including our all hands, like, dude, I get it. It's like sometimes there's like these company meetings and you like go and you're like, this is so boring. It's not relevant to me. You don't have to go and nobody can fire you for not going. Whoever owns the meeting should reach out to you and go like, hey, Bob, I noticed you haven't been at the meeting. I'm curious why. And you should have the courage and the ability candidly to give the feedback to say, I think it's boring. And if I was to make it fun, I would do a breakout after 20 minutes and I would do a feedback Q&A at the end. Hey, that's awesome feedback. Let us consider that. You know what I mean? Like, I just think meetings are the soul sucking tool of most organizations.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to remember the no agenda, no attenda thing. I've never heard anybody say that before.
Yeah, I think I got it from Cameron Harold. He wrote a book called Meeting Sucks. Yeah, no agenda, no attenda.
Awesome. Final question I have for you is obviously huge systems guy, huge personal optimization guy, incredible exits you've had. What is the thing that you're having a hard time right now personally buying back your time for? Where do you still find that you haven't solved the answer for this thing yet? You may have an idea of how to do it, but you haven't actually done it yet.
I think it's not, see, this is the fascinating part is that scale. It's not necessarily of like how to buy back your time. Cause like people don't get this, but you can, like you and I could buy a restaurant tomorrow and we own the restaurant. We're not going in the kitchen. We're not hiring people. We just own the restaurant. Like if you have the capital, you buy a restaurant, it has a management team, the restaurant generates revenue and you hire the person, right? We're only responsible for the person we put into the restaurant. So at a certain scale, there's nothing business-wise that you can't just hire somebody if you have the capital, right? Like some people work for me, make $1 million plus a year. Though like that, you can pay for talent, okay? Then it's really about like giving yourself permission to have fun doing the thing you're doing, okay? So like until there's an AI robot that looks like Dan's here talking to Ravi. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So then the question is allowing yourself to ask what would need to be true for you to love this. It's my favorite question to ask my clients, okay? You need to do this. You don't enjoy doing it. It's red in your calendar, but nobody else can do this, okay? What would need to be true for you to love it? So I would say some of the creative stuff that I've been working with, my business partner, my creative director, Sam, sitting here, is how do we infuse a process that I'm enjoying, right? And that's the game we're playing is like, he's like, we need to do this. We need to do this. It's like, cool. I don't like it when it's like this. I like document. I don't like create. I like ideation. I don't like process. I like results. I don't like effort. Right. And so like we're working through and we have an unlimited budget. Like we'll figure this out. Will we figure it out in the next 3 weeks or 3 months or 3 years? I don't know. I guarantee we're going to figure it out. It'd be nice to do it sooner than later. Until then, he has to deal with Grumpy Dan sometimes. But that's like, dude, don't ask me that question that way. I don't like it. I think it's trying to figure out how do we learn to love the way we do things and and this is a big thing, give yourself permission to do that. Like you're allowed to say, what would need to be true for me to love interviewing on a podcast more? Well, you know what? I spend 8 hours every interview trying to do research on the person. I'm going to give myself permission to hire somebody to do that for me. Whoa, okay, that's cool. And you know what? I don't want to deal with media stuff afterwards or editing or publishing on social media. I love the interview part, not anything else. Give yourself permission to buy back that time. See, most people are so, they have these narrative and stories about that they have to do that part that they can never let it go. And like I said, it's probably the reason why you're successful, but it's the thing that's going to stop you from growing. Your number one strength becomes your number one Achilles heel as you grow. And to the ability that you can be creative to solve that and do it better, that is your next skill to develop. Like everybody's here to audit, transfer, fill. Fill your time by developing a new skill to become more valuable. Some people, the skill they got to invest in is how do I be more creative at scale with a team? Tom Clancy wrote a bunch of books. Do you know that most of those books he didn't write?
Yeah.
Like people don't realize this. Like Andy Warhol had the factory. Oprah had a whole team of people, production assistants producing the Oprah show. She didn't sit there and do everything. She was 10-80-10. She looked at the first part of the ideas and somebody else produced it and she helped with the integration. Steve Jobs didn't sit there and write soldered, boards and write code, but he was the person that ideated with Johnny Ives and then presented at the events. And I think that's the area that for me on a creative part where I'm like, where do I insert myself that I love to do it? And I may not always love to do it, but for now I'm interested in the journey, the process, like what makes great content.
Yeah.
And then as we develop a process that we feel the market loves and interacts with that we can scale up, then we buy back the time. So that's for me right now, I'm deep in media. That's the area. And because it's so creative, it kind of reminds me back to the innovation days when I was writing software. And I know there's people that have solved it and we just hire those people to teach us and then we integrate it into our systems and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like everybody right now, I feel I just had Jeremy Miner on here too, and we were talking a lot about content on that as well. It's like everybody, even if you weren't doing it previously, it's like you're trying to learn, how do I apply systems? How do I invest my time into this right now? But almost always it'll have a massive return on it. Dan, excellent interview. I'm going to give a personal plug because I have read the book. If you guys have not read Buy Back Your Time, I do recommend buying it. It was awesome. I'd like to consider I'm a pretty optimized systems guy, and I still took a few lessons, including the house manager that I hired. But excellent, well-written book. If somebody's listening to this, they like you, they like your vibe, they want to work with you, they want to learn more from you, other than buying the book, what's the best place they can get in contact with you?
Yeah, I mean, Ravi, because your audience would nerd out on this stuff, and I usually don't do this, I'm going to offer, if everybody follows me on Instagram, that's the only thing I ask. Just give me a follow, but then message me, your name plus EA, executive assistant. And I'll get my team to follow up and send my direct link to a sanitized version of my internal playbook for my assistant.
Oh,
so
wow.
it'll list all the categories, the preference stuff, the meeting, my North Star principle. So I'll give that to anybody. Dan Martell, 2 L's of Martell on Instagram. Follow me, send me that message. If they forget to write your name, I'm not sending it.
I like it. I'm going to probably do that once we get done with this as well. So follow him on Instagram. We'll drop it in the show notes. And it's Ravi Abuvala plus EA. He'll send that over to you. Awesome. Well, it was a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much.
It's an honor, man. This is
and I'll
awesome.
see you guys in the next episode.